The new birth. The story starts with Jesus going to the annual Passover festival. Every Jewish male is supposed to be there. In actuality, they were supposed to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year, but for those who lived a long ways away, they often didn't make the other 2. But this right here is a festival that they tried to go to, or at least they really should. The story takes place in what's to this day called the Second Temple. You may look at it, there are actually 3 temples, but it's still referred to as the Second Temple. The first temple was built 1,000 years before by Solomon. That one was destroyed, and then about 500 years before, they built the Second Temple, those who came back from Persia. 50 years before this happened, 46 years to be exact, Herod remodeled the temple. He was not a full Jew and was not even allowed to go to the temple. But and he definitely couldn't tear this one down and rebuild it. So it was said that he remodeled the temple. He basically redid the whole thing, but it was still held to the only reason that he was allowed to do it was the fact he was not destroying the temple, he was not rebuilding it, he was only remodeling it. So that is a technicality. The amazing thing, the temple's not even done at this story. It was started, the remodeling job was started 46 years before, but it would not be done until just before it was destroyed at 70 AD. That's why the Jews were shocked when Jesus said, tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. Well, it had been 40-some years and it still wasn't done. It was amazing. The story talks about Jesus going in and cleansing the temple. This happens twice in his ministry, as far as we know. The first time is near the beginning of his ministry, and that is his story right here. The second time happens just before he is crucified. What the Jews did, what the Jewish leaders did, is that they went to the court of the Gentiles and they set up a market. This angered Jesus for 2 reasons, because by setting it up right there, it did 2 things. It pushed the Gentiles out. 1,000 years before, when Solomon built the temple, he made a place where non-Jews could come to the temple and pray. They couldn't go into the temple, but the Gentiles could go to this court and be as close as they could get, and there they could pray. What the religious leaders did, they took this part and made it into a marketplace, and by that pushing the Gentiles out. But the other thing is that they were cheating the Jewish people. They were taking advantage of them. To go in, they had to pay the temple tax, and that had to be done with money that was right there. It was a special minted money. And so if you had any other time, you had to exchange the money at a high rate of exchange. Besides that, you had to have a sacrifice. You could bring your own, but if you traveled from a long ways away, that wasn't practical. And besides, if you came from a shorter distance and brought your own, it might not be good enough, may not be perfect. But if you bought one of the animals at the marketplace, at a very high price, by the way, it was guaranteed to be approved. So in essence, it was a racket all the way around. And Jesus cleanses the temple. In his zeal, as the scripture says, in his anger, he took care of the situation. He made his point, but he still was considerate of the merchants. See, there was three things. There was the animals, there were the birds, and then there was the money. Now, Jesus made a whip, took some cords to make a whip. That wasn't for the people. That was to chase out the animals. Now, the merchants could go and collect them up again. He turned over the money tables, but the coins could be picked up. It's the birds. If Jesus had opened up the cages and let them out, they were gone. But he didn't. He turned to them. After he drove the animals out, he turned over the tables. He turned to them and said, "Take the birds out." So even in all this, Jesus was considerate of the merchants. After this, Jesus meets with Nicodemus. A little bit about him. He was a Pharisee, which meant that he was one who lived a stricter lifestyle. He was one who truly wanted God's will for his life. But on top of that, he was a member of the Sanhedrin, which was the ruling body, which meant that he was a highly respected Pharisee. But the most important part, as far as this story is concerned, is he was not one just to accept the official position about Jesus. He went and talked to him personally. He had questions. He's criticized for going to Jesus by night as if he was hiding. He didn't need to hide. He was an official. He was, if anything, people hid from him. He didn't hide from them. He really didn't care. No, if you've been to Israel, you know with the hustle and bustle of the day and the heat of the day and all the people around, the best time to visit with someone is to go up on the rooftop at nighttime and visit. It means your visit can be a little bit longer. He was not hiding. At this point in his life, he was seeking. Later on, he defended Jesus. And finally, after the crucifixion, he helped bury him. There's a lot about this great man that is an example to all of us. Come back next week when we continue on with more insights on the story of the week. We'll see you next week.